We've all taken a test that we didn't care if we passed or failed. The test wasn't to assess us, it was for our teachers or for our school district. We currently have a system in which teachers in schools are assessed by students' performance on a test that may likely disdain, might not come about how they perform and how little to no understanding of the negative consequences for their schools or teachers if they perform well. There are many different reasons on why testing standardized overall is not a fair way to assess a teacher on her teaching abilities or his teaching abilities. Standardized test is giving all students of the same grade the same test and expecting them to perform at a specific level based on how the teacher has taught them. So, saying if you have two teachers and they're given the same curricular, then you give them two classes the same test, then all them students should perform the same. The problem with this is not all students learn the same, not all students have the same background, not all teachers have the same resources. It affects how teachers teach. It changes a lot in the classroom. One of the main problems with standardized testing is that teachers are given a list of what could be on the test. Not what is on the test, but what could be on the test. And they're expected to reach every single thing that is on that list. And everything that is on that list is to be gone over, and their students should be able to perform however they should with that topic. Now, with it being a long list and having until April, at least in Ohio, you have until April, that's when state testing is in April for Ohio. That is not the full school year. That means it's normally mid-April, beginning of April, so that takes away a full month and a half at least from students to learn. Not to mention that the week that it takes for testing, it also takes the students out of the classroom, so they're not learning. So that's almost 2 months of learning that is just gone because of state testing. So they're getting less learning than they would. Now with these long lists, teachers are more to focus on quantity and not quality over the learning. So they might teach the topic, but they don't go in depth over it. They don't go into how it works and why it works this way. They go over the bulletin points, and they're not getting what students really need to learn their best ability. Another thing is that not all students come from the same background. That's not something the teacher can change. That's not something that the school district can change. It's just how the world works. Some students, they come to school ready to learn. Some students come to school with a past of learning, and some have none. It depends on the support system at home as well. If you have a strong support system at home and you're getting a nice support system in the classroom, you're going to strive. It's a given fact. For the students that don't have a support system, they don't necessarily focus on school fully. Maybe it's because they don't know when their next meal is going to come from. Maybe they don't know when they're going to be able to shower, or just stuff in general that is more important to them in their time than school. Sometimes our personal life is more important than school. And it's just how it works. We can't change it. They can't change it. It's just how the world works. And it affects their learning because they can't focus on school like these other students who have a mom and dad that love them and are home all the time and have a dinner every night ready for them when they come home. And they know when they're going to get to shower. And they know that they're going to be at home tonight, not wondering which shelter they're going to be in. And it's just not an overall base on where the student is. The other thing is teachers don't have the same resources. Not all students have iPads anymore. We're getting better. School districts are getting better. Your higher class school districts do have iPads to all students, or Chromebooks, or whatever it is that the school system's using. But if one school has iPads and the other school doesn't have iPads, that shouldn't make a difference in the olden days. But now it does, because having access to the internet is access to more knowledge, access to more resources, and it just changes how a student can learn. If a student's not doing good with paper, maybe they do better with an online activity. So you can do the online activity. If you don't have access to the iPads, you cannot do it. There's just no way for it to be fairly based upon how a student is with the resources that the teacher is given to give the students. If we gave all teachers the same amount of resources, assuming that let's look at 3rd grade, for example. Say they're learning about the Indian and the natives and how the world was come about and how the colonies started forming, and they get a basis of this. We want to do an activity. We want to do a research activity, okay? So we say that every student needs to do a 1-page essay on this by whatever. You give the students their iPads. Now, what do you do about the students that don't have iPads? They don't have a way to look up their Native American tribes. They don't have the way access to go home and look at it because they're not guaranteed to have internet access at home. So in order to judge teachers overall in a full base, we have to have a perfect standard teaching ability too. So with that being said, there is no way that you can do a state test overall and say that it's fair for you to judge a teacher based off of how they perform on a test if they were not given the same resources and the same exact students as the other schools were. It's not a necessarily fair way to judge teachers. Do I believe that we do need to have a system to make sure teachers are teaching and schools are getting curricular out? Absolutely. But standardized testing is definitely not the way. It doesn't make sense. Students do not care about the test. There's nothing in it for them. They just perform it. If it's a long test, I will be the first one to admit I was very guilty of this. It wasn't going to affect me, and I was tired of sitting there. I was tired of reading. I just clicked random buttons so I could get out of there. So to judge teachers based off how their students perform on one test is not necessarily the best way to do it unless we were to live in a perfect world. If we lived in a perfect world and every student had every single same resources, every single student had the same worries about what was going on at home and what they were doing, then it would be a fair way to judge teachers. It would be a fair way to judge what schools were doing and stuff. But we don't live in a perfect world, so we can't judge students or teachers based off of how their students perform on one test when the test isn't necessarily fair overall.